6 o'clock.
We'll go ahead and call the December 15th, 2021 Area Plan Commission public hearing to order. We all ready to go, Mr. Hiddle?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Burns, would you please?
I will. Jackson Bogan,
Present.
Larry Leverance.
Here.
Carlos Snodgrass, Gary Schroeder,
Here.
Jerry Reynolds, Greg Jones, Bob Metzger, Diana Looper,
Here.
Vicki Pearl, Michelle Dennis,
Present.
Tom Murtaugh,
Present.
Perry Brown, Tracy Brown,
Present.
Jason Domkowski,
Here.
Lisa Dullum,
Here.
Kathy Parker,
Here.
Jody Hamilton,
Here.
quorum present.
Thank you, sir. Briefing session.
Thank you. As you can see on your agenda, the one zoning case is B2844. Otherwise, everything else is set before. Thank you.
Is your microphone working?
I think it.
Nope. There you are. Thank you. Approval of the minutes.
I move we approve the minutes from the November 17th, 2021 meeting as submitted.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. New business.
I move to hear and vote on Resolution PD 21-08, Carson and Earl LLC, Murdoch Gardens Phase 2 PD Z 2837.
I second.
Ryan?
All right. Well, you remember this rezone from not too long ago. Back in September, Commission recommended approval, and then the City Council a month later went ahead and got the rezone taken care of. Approximately 2-acre site is now zoned planned development and residential. As you can see, there's not much to demo. In fact, I think a lot of the trees have already come out. The project, here's its simple landscape plan. 50-unit apartment complex with related parking, landscaping, and drainage areas. Final detailed plans consistent of construction plans and final plat. Meet all the conditions, and bonding is being requested and has in fact already been received by our office. So we're in good shape to recommend approval for Resolution PD 2108.
Thank you, Ryan. A quick question on the bonding side. So I see we have one yellow ballot for the resolution. Do we need a separate for the bonding?
No, we've never done that before.
Okay.
Yeah, PDs are a little different.
So it's included in,
yeah,
in the
it's
natural.
included in the
Okay.
resolution, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, if you're platting, you must bond, so essentially, yeah.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Petitioner?
Kyle Betts, Fisher Engineering, 625 South Earl, here representing the petitioner. We really don't have any further comments. Plans have been reviewed and recommended for approval. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Betts. Anyone wishing to speak in favor of this? Opposition? Any questions from the commission members? I like all the chatter. You have a yellow ballot.
We have a unanimous ballot of 13 for approval.
Thank you, Ryan. On to the public hearing.
I move that Z 2844, International Church of the Foursquare Gospel, PDRS to MB, be continued to the January 19th APC public hearing agenda at petitioner's request.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. Administrative matters.
David Hiddle with the Area Plan Commission. This is just an informational item, just to keep you in the loop. For many, many years now, no one knows how long or why, Area Plan Commission staff have handled review of building permits for Clarks Hill, Dayton, and Battleground. And I've spoken with Mike Wolf, the building commissioner, and I think we can realize some efficiencies if we, actually there's a few things that they do that I think we're better suited to do, and a few things we do that the building commission is better suited to do. The first item is this, which is we want to transition our review of those types of building permits. There's only a couple dozen a year really, back to the building commission. It'll take away like an unnecessary step, probably be more expeditious for the builders, everybody involved, the homeowners. And it just is kind of the logical thing to do. What we're going to do then in turn, a little bit down the road, is take care of zoning enforcement, which is more up our alley rather than the building commission. But this is the first step, is just to transition the review of these building permits. And again, it doesn't require a vote or anything, but if you have any questions or thoughts, we'd be happy to answer them.
And I'd just like to say thank you for the cleanup. This is the second item that I can note anyways that since you've been here, which is not all that long, that we've had some, is there a better way to do it? Is there a better way to create and make it better for the public overall? One was the notice and now this. And so I'd like to say thank you for your direction there.
Sure.
Yeah, and this is just one of those things, we have no idea why it was ever done this way. And David brought it up, and it's like, you're right, it's great to have a fresh set of eyes on this, so.
The 2021 student rental report, Mr. O'Gara. Great idea. So we're going to move on to the discussion of the proposed 500-year floodplain study.
Thank you, David Hiddle, Area Plan Commission. This was actually brought up at the Ordinance Committee meeting, and it was mentioned that it should be brought here after some discussion. This is really only informational as well, but we'd again be happy to answer any questions or thoughts you have. So this involves development in the 500-year floodplain. Our staff, along with the county surveyor and the engineering departments for West Lafayette and Lafayette, have been working, or just started working really, with Burke Engineering to study our policy regarding development in the 500-year floodplain. And just a quick note about what that is. Along any river or stream, you have the 100-year floodplain, which is the area that theoretically will get flooded once every 100 years. And then you have a little bit further out the 500-year floodplain, which is theoretically the area that will get flooded once every 500 years. The 100-year floodplain everywhere is very heavily regulated. You can build in it under certain circumstances, but they're very specific circumstances. The 500-year floodplain, most everywhere, with exceptions starting to crop up recently, is largely unregulated. We have a comprehensive plan, specifically the West Lafayette Downtown Plan, that specifically calls for more strict regulation of the 500-year floodplain. And what we've been doing primarily when Ryan negotiates planned unit developments is negotiate that standard into the development. And that's worked for a number of years. But it's occurred to us and to West Lafayette too, I think, that it might be better if that was not just a piece of guidance, but an ordinance. And so as we've considered that, we're wondering what is the impact of that on developability, specifically of the area east of River Road and west of the river. Will it hamper that? how do we balance that with environmental considerations and what the plan really calls for, which is to be very proactive in being concerned about future catastrophic flooding. So it's a big issue, and rather than try to figure it all out ourselves, we wanted to hire an engineer to come in with both cities, with the county surveyor, and study it in depth, find out what our options are and what the ramifications for those options are. So, again, this is, if it results in a change to an ordinance, it will go to the ordinance committee and then eventually to the plan commission for approval and for review, if the study results in that. But this is just a heads up for the sake of transparency, just to answer any questions you might have up front or hear any thoughts. Tom and Larry, did I portray that accurately? Okay.
So just to clarify or reiterate, so this is simply a study to see if an adjustment may need to be made down the road?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any questions? Very well.
So we'll be back with it as it progresses, just to keep everybody up to date.
Look forward to hearing about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm ready.
You ready?
Yep.
Back to you, Ryan.
Okay. It's working, but I'm going to do it from here. So as long as I can be heard, then we're in good shape. So the 2021 rental study is done. We originally were going to do the landlord survey as part of this effort, but it was very clear after doing some interviews that they all had a similar story to tell, that 2020 was really weird. And so the results are so skewed as to not be representative of a typical year. And so very quickly I'm just like, this probably isn't the right year to do this sort of thing. I mean, the only story it'll tell that it was a very disruptive time period that came to a close. So we went ahead and bypassed that, just relied on the HUD Postal Service data, as well as some fall 21 data that the city was able to accumulate. So as usual, we talk about the population. Obviously, we're not dealing with projections anymore. We actually have the full census. And as you can see, we've been kind of growing at a very similar rate. The rate of growth wasn't as much as the previous decade, but was a little higher than the last time we had a rate of growth about this time period was during the 1980s. From 1980 to 90, we had this 7 and change type of growth rate. So it's not something that's unusual in the recent history. Purdue's population, of course, as we all know, is exploding and almost hit 50,000 students this fall, and will likely cross that threshold easily next year with no signs of stopping, particularly with the frozen tuition. And so that really is the story with this, is that Purdue's surge in growth has really, whatever problems there might have been during the pandemic in terms of vacancies, was easily filled by all the incoming students. And that really is the main story to tell. I mean, we go through our list of data of just cataloging things that changed during the year. West Lafayette's going to give me some corrected numbers on their inspection, but there's not going to be any dramatic shifts from what you see here. But the vacancies, we're obviously using the census tract data from the Postal Service, which does their quarterly visits of empty mailboxes, and that report those back to HUD. And so we have these charts for both the Lafayette and West Lafayette areas, which is basically census tracts that capture where the population centers are in both cities, respectively. Knowing that these tracts are, in some cases, go in weird directions, but it's what we have to work with. And so, obviously, West Lafayette has really leveled off since 2017 at this kind of 1% level, hovering over it as an average of all of those tracts over a 4.5-year period. And then Lafayette is similar, no dramatic fluctuations. And we did the analysis of urban, suburban, so focusing on the more core areas of the cities versus those areas outside of those core areas. And so here we show the suburban change for West Lafayette. those suburban unit vacancies really fell way down, relatively, I mean, from 2.5 to 1. And the urban has sort of held steady. So very consistent data, and actually very positive data for West Lafayette. It really, you've kind of seen this equalization between suburban and urban. Not so with Lafayette, but again, there really haven't been any dramatic fluctuations. Lafayette still has a lot of older stock, a lot more vacancies in those urban environments. And so, whereas in the suburbs, it's the opposite. That's the newer stock. It fills up pretty quick. We've identified this phenomenon since 2013 when we first started this, so it's been very, very consistent. So no dramatic changes there. So our recommendations were relative to West Lafayette is we certainly feel that the kind of the moratorium that we had placed after the 2019 year, where we had the most multifamily units drop in a single point in time in West Lafayette's history, that those units have been absorbed by the market, and that there's really no, based on this consistent vacancy data, especially coming out of the pandemic, essentially it's sort of returned back to a normal state. That our recommendation is that there's really no reason to continue that. That said, we also now have a West Lafayette downtown plan, which we didn't have before, and so it has its own policy prescriptions for development that makes accommodations for student housing for sure, but other things as well. And so our recommendation is that those policy prescriptions in the plan be respected, and that we want to see more development diversity in the core areas of West Lafayette, so that it's just not overwhelmed by student housing in all these areas. And I really think City Council's decision to relocate City Hall back to its core historical center, really planted the flag for that idea that downtown West Lafayette has a distinct identity, and it's meant to serve more than just the student body. And so we agree with that, and recommend that the plan proceed as planned, and then really not much else beyond that in terms of our conclusions. This is some of the data that West Lafayette developed for us for fall 21, and again, these are broken down between kind of higher, medium, and lower density environments, all kind of in this core area, and all pretty darn healthy vacancies rates. So that little snapshot in time, I think, is going to kind of be a portent of what's going to be happening for the next calendar year, especially if Purdue's growth continues. The only notable thing is that Purdue really doesn't have any more dormitory construction in the pipeline, and so that's definitely going to continue to put pressure on the city to deliver those units, whether the university leases them or not. That pressure is definitely going to continue, and we see that in potential petitions and people calling our office to want to have a talk about a future project. So all in all, very good news in terms of coming out of the pandemic and kind of transitioning back into a more predictable form. But clearly, the driver is the record enrollment that's occurring at Purdue. That's all I got. Any questions?
Any questions for Ryan? I do have one, Ryan. Do you know, or is there a way to find out the number of units that Purdue is renting from private developers?
Yes.
For use of their freshmen, if you will?
Right.
I say
It's
freshmen,
reported on page 5 under the Purdue University housing section. It says that their housing capacity is, as of fall 20, was 13,210 on-campus bed spaces, which is their terminology because they do multiple occupancy in a room sometimes. But they leased 776 off-campus bed spaces at that time. So at that fixed point in time, that's where they were at in terms of the split. And that was in terms of, and then of course the vacancy rate was unusually high for obvious reasons. Not everybody came back in the fall of 20. And there was some, Purdue made allowances for virtual instruction at that time, and they still are, but it's been overwhelmed by the number of students that want to physically be on campus. So yeah, we have been tracking this split of on-campus versus off-campus lease. They consider it, and they've been very generous with giving us this data so that we can start kind of building up list of how it's going. Like, are they, you know, leasing even more off campus? Yeah. And, you know, so that's something we're definitely monitoring. But the fact that they do not have any new dorms in the construction pipeline, and if we crest 50,000 students next year, you know, they will be looking for places to go. So.
Thank you.
Hey, Ryan, who actually issued the moratorium? Was it APC or
It
West
was never a
Lafayette?
formal resolution
Okay.
passed by council. It was more of a staff policy that we sort of got nods from city council, yeah, this makes sense. And it was really just, we had so many units coming online in 2019 from prior approvals that they all were ready to open that semester, that we really had not seen such a surge. And so in an abundance of caution, we said, well, rather than entertaining more giant projects like this, let's take a break from the really large ones. We did a lot of little infill projects along the way, but from the very massive projects, you know, and they wouldn't have to necessarily be high rises. They could be, you know, kind of a mid-rise project that's just large, like the Aspire project. Has more beds than the Rise does, for example, but it's lower profile. And so we wanted to see what the vacancy rates were in these projects, let them make their big splash in the market, see if it's absorbed, and then if the vacancy rates come back a year or two later in a healthy way, well, then clearly they've been absorbed, and then we can feel comfortable moving forward, accepting more applications. You know, so that's really how it came down. And like I said, I think at City Council we just sort of got nods that, yeah, that seems like a sensible policy right now. And since so many of these projects are negotiated, that became sort of a term of the negotiation that, okay, you've got a great project, but this isn't the right time. We sort of made that overture to developers during that moratorium period. But it was never an official action of City Council. Yeah.
And for scale, how many beds is something like the Rise? Do you
The
remember that
Rise
off-
has 675 total.
Okay.
Yeah. And Aspire has like over 800. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Anything else? Questions, comments? All right, we will now go to it's not on this, but point 4. Larry, you want to, can you turn that down by chance? Yeah, it's I don't know if you can hear, we're getting some reverb.
I think we can all hear that.
Okay. Yeah, just as for future plans, I'm going to be gone for the January, February, and the March Executive Council meeting. And in planning for that, since I, barring anything strange happening, will be moving into the president role of the commission, wanted to propose that Jackson continue for January, February, and the March Executive Council meeting, Executive Council meeting, and then I will return for the March APC meeting. And that kind of takes the pressure off the vice president to have to jump right in, be a new vice president, and take the pressure off of that person jumping right into chairing those meetings right off the bat. So I asked Eric to prepare a motion to do that. So
Yeah, I believe the form of the motion that you would like to get from a member would be that the presiding officer for the January and February APC meetings be Jackson Bogan, and that the presiding officer for the January, February, and March Executive Committee meeting be Jackson Bogan, and that's all for 2022.
So moved. Okay. Second.
Just when we thought we were done with him.
Well, there can
I'm sorry.
a gift ascension, you know.
The gift that keeps on giving. So you got a motion and a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. We don't need to do anything for ordinance, correct?
No.
Okay. Approval of the January Executive Committee agenda.
I move the following request for subdivision be placed on the January 5th, 2022 Area Plan Commission Executive Committee agenda at petitioner's request, placement thereon being without reference to compliance or noncompliance with the adopted subdivision ordinance. S. 5047 Concord Plaza subdivision, replat of Lot 1, Phase 1, minor sketch.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? That carries. Director's report.
Thank you. The director's report was emailed out this morning. Would be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Hiddle?
Not a question, but I was also pleased on another issue to see the discussions with Purdue and some of the planning there that are beginning to open up
Yeah,
avenues of talk anyway.
that went really well. Ryan and I and our transportation director, Tim, went over and met for a good long time with them. It's going to be twice a year and as needed as things come up. But it was a real good conversation. We share a lot, I think, ideologically and philosophically, so it was good.
Any other? Citizens' comments and grievances? Nobody wants to complain or anything? Oh, man. Mr. Schroeder will take that motion.
I move to adjourn.
So moved.